Dear friends, today we are joined by Federal Senator Dave Sharma. Dave, of course, is a trailblazer. He is the first person of Indian origin to be ever elected to the federal parliament. He was also one of the youngest ambassadors that Australia has ever had when he became the ambassador to Israel in 2013. And of course, he has a prolific academic record as well. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Dave, I want to begin by asking you this, that when did you decide to make the switch from being a diplomat to a politician, and what made you do that, and how has your journey been?
Look, so I didn't, there was no particular sliding doors moment, if you like. It's having worked at a senior level in the public service, though, and the government, I realised that I wanted to contribute more and have a bigger say in national affairs. And in a democratic political system like Australia, that quite properly, that influence resides with the elected representatives. And so when I finished up as Australia's ambassador to Israel, I felt like I'd had a good diplomatic career. I'd made a contribution there. I'd reached the upper echelons of that profession in Australia. And I thought I'd like to find a way to contribute further. So I came back from Israel. I worked in the private sector for some time. I got involved in the Liberal Party and with politics at the local and state and federal level. And then when a seat became vacant, a few of my friends and colleagues in the Liberal Party encouraged me to put my name forward as a potential candidate. And as they say, the rest is history. Here I am.
Yeah. And Dave, you are, of course, of Indian origin.
Right.
We see that the Indian diaspora here has really done extremely well, but we don't see too many faces in politics. Now, of course, we have you, we have Daniel Mukhi, Gurmesh Singh, and several others, but not that much. Why do you think that is? And do you think that that has made any difference in your journey? Has it been an advantage, disadvantage, or in the larger context, it really doesn't matter?
Look, I think we certainly should see, and I would like to encourage more Indian Australians to put their names forward for elected office for whatever political party and at the local, state and federal level. I think, look, to be honest, it's probably the product of the fact that the Indian Australian community is overwhelmingly recently arrived, in the last 2 to 3 decades. And naturally enough, the first wave of arrivals tends to focus on securing a profession, getting a qualification, buying a home, raising children. And it's often only once you get that measure of material security that people start to look at politics as a career. So, if you compare us to, say, the United States and the United Kingdom, where there are many prominent people of Indian nationality or descent in high levels of politics, but also business, I think that's largely because those communities are not much older, but they're a few decades older than Australia by and large. So I certainly see it as part of my role to help encourage, mentor, and demonstrate that politics is open to the Indian Australian community. For me personally, no, I don't think it's been a barrier at all. I mean, I think quite the reverse. I think we know that our parliaments need to be more representative of how the Australian community looks today, not how it looked 30 or 40 years ago. And so we need to have more women in parliament. We need to have more people from different religious and ethnic and country of origin backgrounds. We need to have people from different professional backgrounds. So I would encourage all the Indian Australian community to know that elected office is open to you, and we want you to put your name forward.
Yeah, and if you look at the larger India-Australia relationship, how do you think that has changed, and how significant is this relationship for Australia going forward, especially looking at the geopolitics of the world?
I think this relationship, the Australia-India relationship, is massively important. It's massively important for Australia's economic and security future. It's massively important for broader peace and stability in the neighbourhood in which both Australia and India reside, the Indo-Pacific. And I think it's alive with opportunity, and a lot of that opportunity will be capitalised on and seized upon by the part of Australia who knows India best, which is the Indian origin Australian community. So I'm hugely optimistic about this relationship. I think from quite slow beginnings. For several decades after India's independence, the Australia-India relationship was not really very well developed or of much significance. But in the last decade and a half in particular, we've really seen it grow. We've seen it injected with vitality. We've seen commercial and business ties grow. We've seen investment linkages grow. There is a lot more to do, though, and I think this is a relationship where, if we look all around the world at all of Australia's many relationships with countries around the world, this is a relationship where we really need to be investing a lot, spending a lot of time, and making the most. And I think we're fortunate right now that this government, the Modi government, has taken a very positive view towards Australia. They've got a very high level and tempo of visits to Australia. We get a lot of attention and time for our views, and we can't count on that in Australia. Many countries are courting India around the world. So Australia needs to earn our place there. And for that reason, I think we need to be doing more and spending more time on this relationship.
Yeah. Do you reckon that this realization is across the political spectrum in Australia, that how important the India relationship is, or do you think it does depend on who the leader is, or which political party there is, or do you reckon that it is more or less a bipartisan thing, that this relationship is vitally important for Australia?
Look, I don't think it is as widespread or as deeply held a view as it should be. And I think there's a few reasons for that. Look, firstly, most Australian politicians have made their careers domestically, focused on domestic issues. They haven't often spent much time abroad. In many respects, they're often not all that worldly, to be honest with you. And I don't think they necessarily focus on Australia's position in the region more broadly, and certainly not on particular relationships. So I think we do need to be encouraging our political class to look at this relationship more. I don't think there's any particular partisanship in it, if you know what I mean. I don't think one side of politics in Australia owns this relationship or has done better at it than another. But there have certainly been individual leaders who've invested a lot in it. John Howard, I would single out. Julia Gillard, I would single out. A Labor Prime Minister. Tony Abbott, another Liberal Prime Minister, as people who have really invested a lot in this relationship, made sure they travelled to India. And it's the head of government that really sets the tone for the rest of the government and the bureaucracy, of course. And so it's important we have that level of leadership from, the Prime Minister down.
Yeah, and just to come back to Australia, Dave, because you work closely with both the Jewish as well as the Hindu community, that there is this sense, that there are certain sections, certain parts of media, academia, who, there's a perception that there's a targeting of these two communities. I mean, if you were to look at examples like, what happened in the University of Sydney with the Jewish students, or the fact that Hindu temples were vandalized, several of them across Australia, not a single arrest has been made, let alone a conviction. So why do you think that is, and what can be done to address that? Because there is a palpable sense of anxiety. It's something probably you may have also felt when you interact with the community. So what can be done to reassure people in these communities that that there are people who are looking out for them?
Well, look, I think it's important that elected representatives and people in positions of authority, including people like me, speak out strongly about these things when they happen, and realise that whilst their own particular segment of Australia or their own particular Australian sub-community may not have been affected, these sorts of intimidation or violence or harassment, they end up weakening Australia as a whole, no matter what community they're directed at. And that's why I've been so vocal, even though I'm not Jewish, in standing up for the Jewish community through the wave of anti-Semitism they've experienced. And I've certainly been vocal and will be vocal if I see Australia's Indian community, whether it's the Hindu community or the Sikh community or others, who are being targeted or singled out because of their religion. That's not acceptable in Australia, but it's also fundamentally detrimental to who we are as a nation and the strength of our society.
Yeah. Dave, lastly, what would you like to say to a lot of people who would be listening to you outside of Australia about Australian multiculturalism? Because that is something that a lot of people, frankly, outside of Australia are not aware of, that how multicultural Australia is. So to conclude, what would be your parting words?
Well, I mean, many people outside Australia might not know that the second largest overseas born population in Australia is from India, and about 30% of the Australian population is born outside of Australia. About 50% of the Australian population has had one or more of their parents born outside of Australia. So we're a nation that has been built on the back of many successful waves of migration over many decades. And at times that has come with its challenges. We don't pretend otherwise. Whenever you're bringing in new people into a society, it will always take some time to adjust. But overwhelmingly, we're a welcoming society, and we want to ensure that every Australian, no matter whether you became an Australian citizen 2 weeks ago or 200 years ago through your family, or if you're our Indigenous Australians and you've been here for tens of thousands of years, we want to make sure that every Australian has the opportunity to succeed, that they are all treated equally before the law, that they all enjoy the same protections that our constitutional and legal system grants them, and that everything is open to them. It's the highest offices in the land, whether it's in politics, in the military, in business, in the arts and culture, in media. You have a great opportunity to succeed here. And, I want to ensure we continue to attract in Australia a very high quality group of migrants, which we've done historically. So please know that if you come to Australia, if you choose to make Australia your home, we will make you very welcome.
Dave, thank you for giving us your time today, and I'm sure we are going to interview again very shortly. Thank you so much, Dave.
I hope so very much. Thank you.
Thank you.